Hello and welcome to this episode of the Bubbs on Sports podcast. Today is Wednesday, January 18th. Hope everybody's having a day so far. A lot to get into today as we are coming off a big night last night in the world of sports. Had a lot of action on in college basketball. Obviously had a lot of hockey and NBA action on as well. Nets take another tough loss as they fall to the San Antonio Spurs on the road. They dropped their third straight, and more specifically, their third straight without Kevin Durant. They are now 0-3 since the KD injury that happened down in Miami. They go on to win that game, and since then, they have taken three really tough losses against the Celtics, against the Thunder, and against the Spurs, and you can make the real strong argument, not really the strong argument, but you can make really the bottom line is if we have Kevin Durant, we win these three games. So it's frustrating. Last night was another example of not much offense at all. They only scored 98 points. The defense played fine, but the offense just couldn't score enough. And, they were awful from three. They shot 13% from the game from three. Just brutal. Not enough guys stepping up. A couple turnovers as well. It wasn't good enough. So a frustrating loss. And right now the Nets they're falling a little bit, and they got to find a way to bounce back because Kevin Durant's not coming back tomorrow. So they got to find a way to get this turning in the right direction because they can't afford to lose 6-7. Let this pile up into 6-7 straight games in a row of tough losses. Because then again, as we mentioned, when Kevin Durant went down, the Nets were, they were really a half a game out from the number one seed in the Eastern Conference. You now look at it. If they continue to lose like this and they lose three more in a row and that piles up to six straight, there's a good chance when Kevin Durant comes back, they're the 5 or 6 seed and they drop 4 spots in the East. And right now, there is not many games separating the Nets right now and the other teams in the Eastern Conference. Nets right now drop from the 2 all the way to the 4 now, and only 3 games separate the Nets and the 6-seeded Knicks. And one game, the Nets and Cavs right now, the Nets have the tiebreaker, but the Nets and Cavs right now are basically tied for 5 games back in the 1 seed. The Nets are falling right now, so they got to turn it around. Another tough loss for them. They'll get the night off. Tomorrow they'll play a front end of a back-to-back. They'll have 3 games in the next 4 days. Tomorrow and Friday, day off Saturday. They'll be in Golden State on Sunday night. Hockey for tonight, you got the Isles on. Rangers get the night off. Knicks will be in action tonight at the Garden as they will welcome the Wizards. And as I mentioned, the Nets will have the day off tonight. So a lot to get into today. Got 2 topics to get into. We're going to start off with the Jets offensive coordinator search. Haven't talked about this a ton, obviously, with the entire postseason going on and all that good stuff and, getting ready for the divisional round, especially with the Giants, getting ready to play the Eagles in the divisional round. Want to get to the Jets and their offensive coordinator search as some more names got added to the list. And today, the Jets interviewed Nathaniel Hackett. Want to get into some of the names, where the Jets currently stand, my thoughts on the entire situation. It is really just it's just an interesting situation because you don't know what's going to happen. Some of the candidates that they've interviewed, you don't love. Experience, play calling are the 2 biggest things in my opinion. So we'll get into it. We'll talk about the candidates, all that good stuff. I also want to get into Oscar Tshiebwe's big performance last night as Kentucky gets a big win over Georgia, 85-71. After a really rough first half, they went into halftime down 8. Tshiebwe comes back with a massive 37-point, 24-rebound triple-double. Was amazing. One of his best games I've ever seen. One of the best games I've ever seen from a massive, massive game. Kentucky wins their 2nd straight and 2 big wins now on the road in Tennessee, and they just beat Georgia. They're now 12-6 on the year, and now you get a big matchup coming up this weekend at Rupp Arena against Texas A&M. Kentucky seems to be finding a little bit of a groove here with 2 big wins after that really bad South Carolina loss last week at home. So a good win for Kentucky. We'll get into that as well. And what this means as they continue to get hot and seem like they could be getting back in the conversation when talking about the AP Top 25. And, look for a little bit there. Like Kentucky might miss the March Madness. But if they keep winning like this and, these 2 straight wins, if these 2 straight wins show us anything, it's showing us that this Kentucky team's turning a corner and they're getting back to the team that we expected them to be at the beginning of the season. So we'll get into that as well. But with all that being said, this is the Bubbs on Sports podcast, and let's get right into it. So as I mentioned, as the NFL postseason and the playoffs roll on and the New York Giants get ready to play the Eagles and the Bills will welcome the Bengals to Buffalo, the Niners will also be in action this weekend as well. They will host the Cowboys, and then you got the Chiefs, Jaguars, which will actually get the weekend started again at home in Arrowhead. The 2 games on will be Chiefs, Jaguars, Giants, Eagles on Saturday. Sunday will obviously be Bills hosting the Bengals, and the Niners hosting the Cowboys fresh off of their win on Monday night against the Bucks. So as all that's going on, yeah, obviously throughout the league, you got the head coaching vacancies. You got the big rumors surrounding Sean Payton, other head coaching vacancies, the Texans, all these different areas, the Colts, Panthers, couple different teams, obviously, looking for coaching. The Broncos, rather, though. The Bucks might be looking for coaching soon because Todd Bowles is not very good. But we'll see how that all plays out down in Tampa, especially with, what Tom Brady's future is. But with all that going on, the Jets continue to search for their offensive coordinator as we have now entered really a week and a half since the season ended. About a week ago today, really about a week ago now, the Jets fired their offensive coordinator, Mike LaFleur, and new candidates are coming about every day. And look, it's just an interesting situation for the New York Jets because when an offensive coordinator gets fired, we see sometimes it's either because you had a really good quarterback and he just underachieved, there was clear bad play calling, or it was just a train wreck, or whatever it was, right? But the Jets are in a different situation where the Jets are not only looking for an offensive coordinator, they're also looking for a quarterback. A lot of times we see these situations where when the head coach stays, the defensive staff stays, and you fire your offensive coordinator, most of the time it's a situation where you might, maybe you don't have the answer at quarterback, but you might have a really good draft pick and you could draft a quarterback and bring in an offensive coordinator to develop that quarterback. That could obviously be an option. Or you could have a really good quarterback, and you have to fire the offensive coordinator because the quarterback either underachieved or the play calling was really bad or there was the disconnect between the really good quarterback and the offensive coordinator. But the Jets situation is definitely a unique situation. And look, I was all for the firing of Mike LaFleur. I was. Look, the play calling to me, Mike LaFleur's to me what ultimately lost me with Mike LaFleur was that Vikings games, the 3 plays in the red zone just got me so frustrated because you blew that game. You had 3 plays from the 1-yard line, and I understand if Berrios catches that football, you win that. Most likely you win that game, and who knows how the season plays out from there. But the fact is, the 3 play calls were still really bad. And then to lose 6 straight games, to not score a touchdown for 3 weeks, the season ended in January. The Jets didn't score since the week before Christmas was the last time the Jets scored a touchdown to close out the season. It was a Zach Wilson pass to C.J. Uzomah in a game the Jets ended up losing anyway because the defense couldn't stop the Lions tight end on a 4th and inches. He broke it and went for a 51-yard touchdown, and that right there was the Jets' season crumble right in front of us at home. Sure enough, they go on, obviously, to lose the next 3 against the Jags, Seattle, and in the meaningless game down in Miami where they couldn't score either. So the Jets are in an interesting situation because Zach Wilson's not going to be your starter next year. Mike White probably most likely won't be either. So you're looking at a situation where you don't have a quarterback, you need an offensive coordinator, and oh yeah, by the way, Saleh has won 11 games in 2 years. He's coming off of a season in which he went 7-10 and the team collapsed. They were 7-4. They finished 7-10, and he's on the hot seat. Saleh's on the hot seat. Douglas is on the hot seat. The entire coaching staff's on a hot seat. So when you ask yourself, who's going to want to take this job? You really don't know because this job is not really appealing. It's not like we have Justin Herbert and somebody, an offensive coordinator would love to work with Justin Herbert. A star-studded young quarterback, bright future, phenomenal. Just an all-around great athlete, mobility, does a lot of good things, right? It's not like you're giving them an opportunity to work with Patrick Mahomes. You're bringing in an offensive coordinator. The offensive coordinator is going to have to agree to come to a team where the head coach and the GM are on the hot seat. You don't know what the future holds. It's playoffs or bust, and you don't have a quarterback. So when you look at the names on this list, And as a Jet fan, you might sit there and say, man, what are we doing? Why are we not interviewing Frank Wright? Why are we not interviewing Gary Kubiak? What about Todd Monken down in Georgia, who has done a phenomenal job there? He's getting paid a ton, about $2 million a year to be the offensive coordinator there. He might get a coaching gig in college someday. I don't think he's coming here. I think that's a reach. Nor do I think the Jets and Woody Johnson are going to go out and pay a ton of money for an offensive coordinator like that. I have this feeling, and I think a lot of other people do too, the Jets are going to need to hire, and they probably will hire, an offensive coordinator with not much experience, who's probably going to want to come here, try to prove himself, bring in a new quarterback, and if you can show, oh, I took this Jets team from one of the worst offenses in football to a top 12, top 10 offense in football, then he gets some league-wide notice. I just think the Jets' approach to this is, it seems as if they're going after the inexperienced, not much play-calling experience offensive coordinators and the offensive minds. Let me read you some of the names. There are some names on here that do have play-calling experience. There are. But there's a couple of them that you kind of scratch your head and say, these are interesting. So Marcus Brady, they interviewed. Former Colts offensive coordinator. Has some experience play-calling. I believe he also was in the CFL. He has some experience. Okay? Not a household name, but it is what it is. They did interview Darrell Bevell, but a report came out today. It seems as if all signs are pointing to Darrell Bevell returning as the quarterback's coach, passing game coordinator, quarterback's coach in Miami. So it looks as if he'll stay there. But it will be interesting. It looks like he's going to stay there. He's not going to he's not going to interview anymore for the Jets or the Commanders job. I think was the other one in Washington that he was looking for. So he's staying. So Bevell's out of the equation, but he was the guy the Jets interviewed. And I actually didn't hate the Bevell interview. He has a lot of experience calling plays. He's actually been an interim coach twice when the Lions fired Patricia and the Jags fired Urban Meyer last season. So he does have some experience as a coach for a couple games, although albeit, at that point it's a train wreck when you got to be the interim head coach. But he does have some, he has play calling experience. He's got some experience, being a coach for a little bit. Like, he's experienced. Is he so much successful? It's tough to say, but he has a lot of experience in the NFL. Experience is the biggest thing in my opinion, and they got to have play calling. You can't bring in an offensive coordinator. You just can't bring in an offensive coordinator who doesn't have any experience play calling and then expect them to have different results to Mike LaFleur. That's where the Jets hurt Zach Wilson a little bit. Look, Zach Wilson did not play well. Don't get me wrong. He played bad, and I've said that a ton of times on this show and in my Jets podcast that I do as well. I've said a ton of times, I was all for benching Zach Wilson. But there's also a little bit where the Jets are also a little to blame for Zach Wilson's failures. They gave him an offensive coordinator who had zero experience calling the plays. That's who they gave him. They also gave him a quarterback's coach in Calabrese who had zero experience either. So there's a little bit there, too. The Jets are to blame for some of the hires they made to try and help Zach. They didn't give him much experience. So you got to learn. Experience is key in this situation. The other two names on this list, one of them really concerns me, and that is Nick Caley, who's the Patriots tight ends coach. The Patriots offense this season was dreadful. At times, it was even worse than our offense, right? The Patriots offense had Matt Patricia and Joe Judge leading the way. If this guy couldn't get a different role or a higher role in the on the offensive staff other than just a tight ends coach, that's a little concerning to me. So I would probably, kind of go away from him. And the other guy was Kevin Patullo, Eagles passing game coordinator. And then today we hear about Nathaniel Hackett. And look, Nathaniel Hackett's is a interesting, and this is also what I want to get to here. It's an interesting hire, right? Because Nathaniel Hackett obviously was the offensive coordinator with the Jacksonville Jaguars during the 1 year where they made the run with Blake Bortles, which is an incredible accomplishment. They had a very good offense under Blake Bortles, and he was calling the plays. Now in Green Bay with Rodgers, the part of you that says, "Oh, he did great in Green Bay," but how much was Aaron Rodgers? How much of it? I mean, people could say, oh, well, he left the Packers, and the Packers' offense this year wasn't the same. A lot of that has to do with Davante Adams. Something else that I wonder with Nathaniel Hackett is, if he comes here, does that automatically tie Aaron Rodgers with him? And I would tend to disagree, because remember when Nathaniel Hackett got hired as the head coach in Denver, and everyone's like, oh, it's confirmed, Aaron Rodgers is going to the Broncos. They hired Hackett. They're going to bring in Aaron Rodgers. It's confirmed. And then sure enough, here comes Russell Wilson from Seattle, and he was the quarterback. And that was a train wreck. Nathaniel Hackett, I'll tell you this. I would take Nathaniel Hackett over Marcus Brady. I would probably take him over Nick Caley and Kevin Patullo as well. I would. He has a lot of experience. But, I think if you bring in Nathaniel Hackett, you got to you have to really make sure that you have to do a deep dive into him and make sure that I guess how I want to word it, that the failure he had in Denver is not what's going to happen again. Like, in terms of, is he nothing without Aaron Rodgers? That's the kind of point I'm getting at. You have to make sure that he's able to work with a different quarterback. And I understand he had that 1 year with Bortles. I get all that. But, sometimes as your career goes on, can he work with a guy like a Derek Carr? Can he work with a different quarterback other than Aaron Rodgers? Because as of right now, last season, it was a train wreck in Denver. And believe me, some of it could have been Russell Wilson, but the final 2 games of the season, when Russell Wilson all of a sudden started to play well, and that's when Nathaniel Hackett left. I mean, I don't want to say, you could say it's a coincidence, but, you kind of line it up. You wonder if Hackett really was the problem in Denver. But again, I mean, I also look at Hackett and I say, he's got a lot of experience coordinating. He was the offensive coordinator in Green Bay. Look, a lot of it probably was Rodgers, but you could sit there and say, look, at the end of the day, he had to be doing something right to be getting the Packers to the playoffs, to help getting the Packers to the playoffs every season. He had to be. And look, sometimes a lot of times, there are great offensive coordinators, great defensive coordinators. They become head coaches and they're terrible. I mean, Todd Bowles is an example. You give him the worst defense in football in 2 years, that will be a top 3 defense. You give him a head coaching gig, he's not any good. There's just some guys out there that are really good coordinators and aren't good coaches. So a part of me also looks at the angle of Nathaniel Hackett of, he's a good coordinator, but he's not a good coach. But he could be a very good offensive coordinator, and he's shown that a little bit throughout his career. There's also that part of you that says he was terrible. He was a terrible head coach in Denver. Is he losing it a little bit? More into his career. What if the same thing happens? There's a risk with all these guys. I said the same thing about the quarterback. It's a reason they're available. There's a reason these guys are available, because there's obviously something wrong with them. Not anyone's going to be perfect, right? And I say with the quarterback, everybody out there wants to nitpick Derek Carr, nitpick Lamar Jackson, Jimmy G, all these things. Look, you could do all that, but there's going to be issues with them. That's why they're available. You're not just going to see Patrick Mahomes on the open market 1 year and say, oh, let's bring him in, let's sign him. There's a reason these guys are available, because there's obviously, they're obviously all not perfect. That's why they're out there. If they were all very good and taking their teams to the playoffs and dominating, they wouldn't be available. Lamar Jackson's a little bit of a different story, because he's entering a free agent year because he's ending his contract. But there's a good chance he gets franchise tagged in and you might have to trade for him. There's also a good chance the Eagles throw everything at, or not the Eagles, the Ravens throw the bank at him and he's a Raven for the rest of his life. That's another thing you want to wonder too, is how do the Jets approach this? Do they hire an offensive coordinator first and then sign a quarterback based off of the scheme the coordinator is? Or do they wait? Because here's the issue. Let's say they hire an offensive coordinator. I'm not going to throw a name out there. I'm just going to say they hire an offensive coordinator, right? Let's say they do that. And then they're like, okay, we're going to get Derek Carr. They're waiting. Derek Carr becomes available. They don't get him. Then what? That's the issue there, right? So, because then you gotta go to Plan B, and it's like, okay, are we going to get a quarterback that doesn't really fit this system? So that's the question that comes into play as well, in terms of who your quarterback and offensive coordinator is. Could the Jets wait this out? I think they're probably going to hire an offensive coordinator first, because I think the coordinator is going to have a lot of say. but do they wait it out, sign a quarterback, and then sign a coordinator? I'd probably go coordinator first, but it makes you think a little bit. It's just the Jets' job in general just isn't very, it's not very pleasant, you know? You have you have a terrible owner. You have a head coach, again, that's on the hot seat, GM on the hot seat. You don't have a quarterback. And again, as much as you could look at this opportunity and say, all right, it's year 3. They almost made the playoffs last season. You expect them to make the playoffs. Anything can happen in the season. This year could completely get derailed. And from offensive coordinator, you could be the interim head coach 14 games in. That's the reality of it all. I mean, there's a chance that the Jets season spirals out of control, and at week 11 they're 2-9, and we're talking about the draft. That's where the Jets currently stand. That's the risk you take. That's the issue when you don't have a quarterback. So it'll be interesting. It really will be. I just hope that they bring in a guy that has experience and hopefully is on board with the right decision at quarterback. I don't want Baker Mayfield here. I don't want Gardner Minshew. I know people like the idea of, Gardner Minshew, Mike White, 2 young guys, bring him in, compete. I don't want that. I just don't. Look, Minshew is a very good he's a very good backup, probably the best backup in the NFL, borderline starter. Is a borderline starter going to win you 10 games next year? Is Gardner Minshew? And I'm asking this. Please, comment down below. If you think yes, comment. I will read your comment and I will, I'll see your reasoning. But can you sit here and really tell me with a straight face that Gardner Minshew is going to win you 10 games next year? Probably not. He might go out there. He's very reckless. He has a lot of turnovers. He makes some dumb decisions. Again, very good backup. Is he a star? I wouldn't be opposed to bringing him in as a backup if they want to go that route, but then that would most likely mean I wouldn't be opposed to bringing in Minshew, getting rid of Zach, bringing in Mike White, and then bringing in a guy like a Carr and completely revamping your quarterback room. I wouldn't be so really opposed to that. I don't know if I would really like Gardner Minshew as a starter. People throw around Baker Mayfield's name. I don't like that either. I don't think Baker Mayfield would handle the media much. I don't think he would handle it well here. Baker Mayfield's, again, similar to Minshew. He's a good backup. We've seen what he can do as a starter in the NFL. Not very good. Not very good. I know he's had some flashes, but, so has Sam Darnold. He's shown flashes too. How did that work here? So I don't think Mayfield's good. I don't think Minshew's good. And look, I would avoid Brady. I know some people I would avoid Brady. I would not bring in Tom Brady. I don't want Tom Brady either. I really don't. Look, this is the name that pops up, is if you bring in Hackett, does that all of a sudden bring Rodgers here? I don't think Rodgers or Lamar Jackson's coming. Neither do I think Tom Brady's coming. I think personally, if I had to put money on it, I think Derek Carr is the quarterback of the New York Jets next season. I do. I really do believe that. And I know the odds and actually the Jets are the odds-on favorite to land Lamar Jackson. I get that, but I don't think Joe Douglas, who has shown in his career he doesn't go out and spend a ton on guys. I don't think he's going to throw the bank at Lamar if he becomes a free agent. I also don't think they're going to trade 2-3 first-round picks for Lamar. I just don't see them doing that. Joe Douglas loves his draft picks, and I have no issue with that. Joe Douglas he's the reason he's still the GM is because of what he did last year in the draft. If he whiffed on that draft, Joe Douglas is a good chance isn't the GM right now. So I have no issue with that. But do you really think Douglas is going to go out there and give up 2 first-round picks for Lamar Jackson? Do you really think that? Probably not. Lamar Jackson comes with his flaws too. He's hurt the past 2 seasons. He's very mobile, which is great, but how long is that going to last? Is this starting to become a decline? Are these injuries going to be, for the next 5 years, he's going to be hurt on and off? And I like Jimmy G a lot. I really do. I know a lot of people don't like Jimmy G, but that's because he's not fancy. He gets the job done. He's not going to go out there and throw sidearm for 300 yards a game, but he gets the job done. He wins big games on the roads, and he got a very good playoff record. Lamar Jackson's 1-3 in the playoffs. So I like Derek Carr. To me, he's my favorite. To me, he's my number one. I like Derek Carr. I'm not opposing Lamar Jackson. I wouldn't hate it if he comes here. I think we would all be. I think if Lamar Jackson signed with the Jets, we would all find a way to like it. We'd all be happy. But there's a risk. Derek Carr He does not get hurt. He's very reliable, right? He plays every game, right? He's very reliable. The only issue with Derek Carr, but he has an issue again. That's the reason why he could be out there. It looks like, there's a chance the Raiders might just straight up cut him. The issue with him is he's got a little bit of turnover problem. That's an issue. He's 14 interceptions this season, 14 interceptions last year. Has 28 picks in the last 2 seasons. That's tough. So that's the issue there. But he's 32. You'd assume he probably still got 3-4 good years left. So it's just interesting. All of these guys have their issues, obviously. But again, that is why they are available. And that is why, that's why it's sometimes tough to find yourselves in this position. But the Jets are, I don't want to say lucky, because they're not lucky. They're not. But the Jets are in a situation where at least they're in a free agent class or a off season where there's some good names available. Last off season, let's just say Zach Wilson was drafted a year prior and all that stuff. Like last off season would have been tough to find a quarterback. It would have been. There wasn't many options available. This year, you get a lot of good options available. You do. You even have, again, Brady's available. Rodgers could be available, and you don't know what's going to happen with Lamar. So you have some solid. You have some big names out there, like Derek Carr's out there. Again, I don't think Brady's coming here. If we get Nathaniel Hackett, my level of not optimism, but my level of belief that Rodgers would be a Jet maybe grows a little bit just because of the connection they have in Green Bay. But again, you can look back at my podcast from last year. When the Broncos hired Nathaniel Hackett to be the head coach, I said on the podcast, Aaron Rodgers is going to Denver. And I was clearly wrong about that. They ended up going out and getting Russell Wilson. So who knows? They could have made an attempt at Rodgers, and Rodgers, and the Packers either said no or Rodgers didn't want to go. So that's the same issue. I would not hire Nathaniel Hackett just to try. If you're going to hire Nathaniel Hackett, and I would not hire Nathaniel Hackett just to try and make a push for Rodgers. Because then if you don't get Rodgers, then why is he here? I wouldn't do that. So we'll see. It's interesting. It's frustrating because it's a 2-year thing with us. It's every 2 years we're talking about this. I mean, it really is. And we've been down this road before. The Jets can get this thing figured out, but do we trust them? No, because the Jets have messed this up so many times. And what with the Jets gives you belief that they're going to finally get this right? Nothing. You have a defensive-minded coach looking for an offensive coordinator. That's not good. You have a general manager, again, on the hot seat, and you have an owner that's terrible. And you wonder, too, how much power Saleh and Douglas really have. You really do wonder that. Because Saleh's, it's just an interesting situation. It really is. And you just never know. It's tough, but we'll see. I think we'll figure out offensive coordinator, scheme, and then you got to go get a quarterback. I think right now, if I had to choose, it's probably Derek Carr, but I like Carr a lot. I would welcome Carr here. I would. Minshew, Mayfield, I hear those names, but I don't know why Jets fans would want that. I really don't. I mean, I would take Minshew before Mayfield. I would tell you that. Mayfield's like my last option. I would not want Mayfield. I'd take Brady over Mayfield. I think a lot of people would. That's not crazy to say. I don't want Mayfield here. I don't. I don't know. People talk about Zach and Darnold and some of those failed draft picks. I mean, Mayfield's basically a failed draft pick. I don't want Mayfield here. And again, Minshew, very, very good starter or backup. Is he good enough? That's the question. Is he good enough to win 10 games? Is he? Gardner Minshew, he might go out there and show out for 3 games and play insane. But is he good enough to do that 10 times? Or, is he going to be able to go out there? We need a guy that's going to play 17 games, throw 24, 25 touchdowns, 9, 10 picks, high threes, 4,000 yards. That's the type of quarterback the Jets need. Is Gardner Minshew going to do that for you? Probably not. Derek Carr, yeah, that was basically his year last year. He's got to figure out the interceptions a little bit, though. 14 interceptions with all the way at the top of the league in terms of bad. That's the one thing. Turning the ball over is tough. So, but the car is also very reliable, and that's something the Jets haven't had. The Jets, I mean, every year the Jets, it's a revolving door at quarterback. We need consistency there. Consistency is so key. You could say, oh, bring in this guy. If he's hurt all the time, that's not consistency. We need a guy that's going to go out there, play 17 games, play at a high level for 17 games. Carr does that. And I like Carr. I do. I would. And I would not be opposed to Jimmy G. The injuries are an issue. Reliability is an issue. But he gets it done. He does. I think a lot of people are hating on Jimmy G. You hear people out there that would take Minshew over Jimmy G. I would not do that. I think that's ridiculous. You want to bring in Minshew as a backup, go ahead, do it. I'm not bringing him as a starter. So we'll see. It's a Jets type of offseason. It's never a true offseason for the New York Jets unless if there's an offensive coordinator or quarterback for need. Like last year, this feels right. Talking about this feels right because this, it's every 2 years. So last season we got a year off. This year we get it again. Probably 2 years from now, if they don't get it right, we'll be back down this path. Maybe next season if it really spirals out of control because we'll be looking for everything new. We'll be looking for a new GM and a coach. And this time, Woody will be leading the church, so that would be interesting. They got to find a quarterback that's going to get them into the playoffs. That's the bottom line because that's what they need to do. So we'll see. So now moving on from football to a little bit of college basketball. As a lot of good games on last night, as I mentioned, along with the NBA and hockey and all that good stuff. You had Kentucky and Georgia on yesterday. Kentucky got the win 85-71. They improved to 12-6 on the season. It's been an interesting year for this Kentucky team. It really has been. You start the year with high expectations. Last season obviously ended with the just embarrassing, heartbreaking upset against St. Peter's in the first round, who went on to make some noise and got to the Elite Eight and ended up obviously losing to North Carolina, who went on to, obviously, win it all and all that good stuff. So it was a tough year last year in the March Madness. You come into this season, you got a couple guys returning. Wheeler, C.J. Frederick, who got hurt last season, he's back. Obviously, Oscar Tshiebwe, who I think a lot of people were surprised, but he's back. And you go into this season as a Kentucky fan, and you have some good expectations. You feel definitely should, hopefully be a top seed, a 1-2 seed in the, SEC. A 1 seed, ideally a 1 seed in the March Madness, get back in, make some noise, obviously win the tournament, win the whole thing. And the year kind of started off slow, and it's almost like, they get that win against LSU, which was big. To start the month of January, to start the new year, they get that win against LSU. They beat them by 3, which was a big SEC home win at home, especially after getting embarrassed about a week prior in Missouri, against Missouri, where they got smoked and they lost by 14. They beat Louisville, then they beat Louisville, beat LSU, and then they have 2 games where arguably I can make the argument those were the 2 worst games I've ever seen a Kentucky team play. And I know the score against South Carolina doesn't tell you everything because you look at the score and you say, it was a 3-point game. Kentucky was in it. It was a late comeback that made them just somewhat in the game. They were getting crushed from the start. They couldn't score. They shot 30% from 3. It wasn't good. Their defense wasn't very good. It was just a bad game. They got out rebounded. It was ugly, really ugly. Starting lineup, some of the it was bad. When you lose to South Carolina at home, that's ugly. But the loss that really hurt was the Alabama loss, which was obviously prior to that, where they get crushed. I mean, they lost by, what was it, 30, 28, 26, right? 78, 20, 52, yeah, 26. They lost by 26 against Bama on the road. They come home against South Carolina, an opportunity to it's like a get-right game. And that's what's nice about college basketball is you could get crushed on a Saturday, come back on Tuesday, and it's like, you come back on Tuesday, play a bad, mid-level team or a 500 team, get a win, get your confidence back, and you got another game that next weekend, a big game, whether it's in Auburn, Tennessee, or whatever. Kentucky loses both those games. South Carolina, and then to or Alabama, then South Carolina, and you go into that Tennessee game, you're thinking to yourself, man, this is going to be bad. And whatever clicked in that Tennessee game is Kentucky teams playing with a different energy, because you get that massive win against Tennessee on the road against fifth-ranked Tennessee, 63-56 after they started the game. Tennessee started the game on an 8-0 run. And you're thinking to yourself, yeah, this might be like a 70-40 game. Kentucky wins that game on the road in Tennessee. A massive win to get back, on the winning side of things after you get crushed a week prior on the road. You get a massive win on the road against Tennessee. And then yesterday, they start off slow against Georgia, go into halftime down 8, and then Oscar Tshiebwe, reigning National Player of the Year, plays like the National Player of the Year, plays like the best player in the nation, and goes out and scores 37 points, 24 rebounds, and Kentucky gets the win by 14. They went down by 8. They came out and outscored Georgia by 22. Down 8, came back, outscored Georgia in the second half, 51-29. Defense played well. Offense stepped up. Oscar Tshiebwe stepped up. Kentucky goes on to win by 14. And now you look and you say, all right, Kentucky went from in a really bad position where they went from 1-3 in the conference going into that Tennessee game. You're thinking to yourself, oh, they're going to be 1-4. To now back-to-back 2 big conference wins. And by the way, Georgia going into last night's game was 3-1 in the conference. Georgia, who had a really bad year last year, is a much better, much improved team this season that currently stands at 13-5. I know they're not ranked, but they're still 3-1 in the conference. They're looking to get their 4th win. For Kentucky to come out in the second half like that, it's also a credit to Cal. I've been rough on him this season. We've all said it, we've said it all year long. You have questions about how he coaches, his style, if he's really caught up to the modern game. We don't have much three-point shooting, the time management, the timeout. The timeouts are questionable. Sometimes he'll let the game get out of control, then call a timeout late in games sometimes, where you think you have the ability to advance the ball or draw up a play. You don't call timeouts. He's interesting the way he coaches sometimes. But to go into halftime, they made the necessary adjustments, and Oscar Tshiebwe came out and had the best half of his life. And Kentucky gets the win. He played 38 minutes last night, went 12 of 20, 24 rebounds, 37 points. Next closest was Cason Wallace, who had a very good game. He had 17 points, shot 7 of 11. He also went 2 for 4 from 3. We did not shoot well from 3. We didn't. We shot 26% from 3, 4 of 15. But from the field, 29 of 66, 43.9%. We out-rebounded Georgia. We were the more physical team, specifically in the second half. We out-rebounded Georgia 44-31. We had 15 assists. They had 7. We were dishing the ball around, spreading it out a little bit. Jacob Toppin, although he didn't have a very good night from the field, shot 30%. He still finished with 11 points, had a double-double. We were dominant on the boards. We out-rebounded them 44-31, as I mentioned. That's just great. And that's something that Kentucky, specifically in that Alabama game, did not do a good job of. They were just getting hammered in the interior. And that was actually the game where Tshiebwe got benched. And I know they ended up out-rebounding Alabama in that game, but points in the paint, it was crazy. I have to look at the stats, but the point, Alabama was dominating them in the paint. They were. Again, I know they finished with more rebounds, but they were getting they were driving, and the Kentucky could not defend the glass. They could not defend the interior whatsoever. Last night, they were the more physical team. And SEC play, big games, late in games, you're going to need to be physical. And early on in the season, Kentucky wasn't doing that. They were taking some dumb shots, some dumb turnovers, weren't rebounding. Last night is a win as a Kentucky fan where it gives you hope that this team can go on and do something. It's also, we need to see more of this, though. This is 2 straight wins. It's great. Great 2 wins, obviously. 2 big wins on the road. Tennessee against Georgia. Boom. Big wins. Come back against Georgia. Beat Tennessee. Great. That's all great. But we got a big matchup coming up this weekend against Texas A&M. who is 4-0 in the conference. They are 12-5 overall. You're back home for that game. Go out, get a win there. And then next week you got Vanderbilt, where, they're obviously you should be able to beat them as long as it doesn't turn into a South Carolina situation where you get upset. And you have that big game later this month against Kansas, who is number 2 in the nation. And another Kansas lost last night to Kansas State by 1 in overtime. But Kansas is still a very good team. Very good. And you'll get them at home, in which you beat them last season in the Big 12 SEC Challenge. So Kentucky has a huge opportunity coming up. They do. You get 2 big wins. I'd assume if you beat Texas A&M, that's 3 straight wins. 1 come from behind. You go on the road and beat a top 5 team in the nation. I would probably assume Kentucky probably slides back into the AP top 25, right? Because you'd probably be 13-6. You'd get 3 straight conference wins. Again, 1 of those on the road. And then that would set up for a huge opportunity. If you take care of business against Vanderbilt, which they should, that would set up for a huge opportunity at home, welcoming in Kansas a week from this Saturday. That would be huge. So Kentucky really has an opportunity where they destroyed their tournament outlook to start the year, was really bad after a couple of those losses, specifically after that South Carolina loss. But now with just a couple wins and some big performances, you're looking at this Kentucky team. They could really build up their resume again and start playing like the team that we expected them to be at a more consistent level like they did last night in the second half, outscoring Georgia 51-29 on their way to a 14-point victory at home. So big win for Kentucky. And they now await Texas A&M 2 Eastern ESPN on Saturday as they look to get their 3rd straight win in a row. And, rest of the month, obviously, Vandy, Kansas, Ole Miss. Vanderbilt on the road, Ole Miss on the road. They'll get Kansas at home. So looking forward to those games. And Oscar Tshiebwe has been great this season. Zach Edey, obviously, of Purdue, has been very good as well. He'll probably win National Player of the Year. Oscar leads him in rebounds. Edey leads him in field goal percentage and points. So they're pretty close. It's not far off. But that last night was a National Player of the Year type performance from Oscar Tshiebwe. And when we needed it most. Again, your team's down. When your team's down in games, you need your best player to step up. And Oscar Tshiebwe did just that last night for Kentucky. So a big win. All right, so now as we close things out here today on the program, as I mentioned, got a good amount of NBA on tonight. Pretty full slate, actually. Mavericks, Hawks, Cavs, Grizzlies, Heat, Pelicans, Hornets, Rockets, Pacers, Thunder, Clippers, Jazz, Timberwolves, Nuggets, and the Kings, Lakers. You'll get the Knicks, Wizards tonight at the Garden. Knicks look to bounce back after a tough loss the other day. I believe that was MLK Day. Yeah, that was Monday. After a tough loss on Monday in overtime against the Raptors, they will look to bounce back at home against the Wizards tonight. Wizards 18-26 come into this game 12th in the Eastern Conference. And as for the NHL tonight, you got 5 games on. Senators, Penguins, Avalanche, Flames, Lightning, Canucks, Stars, Sharks. Rangers will be back on tomorrow as they'll host the Bruins for a big game. Bruins have been dominant this year. First in the Atlantic. 72 points already, 34-5-4. That will be a big game tomorrow at home for the Rangers at MSG. But for tonight, Islanders will face the Bruins. So Bruins will hit up the Isles and then hit up the Rangers. I mean, the Bruins have been unbelievable this year. I mean, they've just been insane. 34-5-4. So they'll get the Bruins on the second half of a back-to-back. Islanders will get them on the front end. And we will see if the Isles and the Rangers together can complete the New York sweep of the Bruins. We will see. Also, some college basketball on tonight as well. You got UConn and Seton Hall. You got LSU, Auburn, TCU, West Virginia, Virginia Tech, Xavier, DePaul, Arkansas, Missouri, Marquette, Providence are your top 25 games on tonight. And, for a little bit of a Wednesday night basketball action, got some hockey, got some basketball. So looking forward to that tonight. As it's a nice, calm Wednesday night. Knicks at the Garden. Islanders, UBS Arena welcoming the Bruins. Rangers will welcome the Bruins to MSG tomorrow. Nets will be back tomorrow. Nets did get the day off today. They'll have 3 of their next 4 games. You got to find a way to split them. Or you got to find a way to at least win one of these next 3. You have to, at least. You got 3 you got tomorrow, back-to-back Thursday, Friday. You have a day off Saturday. You have back-in-action Sunday where you play the Warriors. Find a way to split the next 2. Find a way to split Thursday, Friday, and then that Warriors game, end. Get a win there, and, if you can get a win there, beat the Warriors on the road, that's a nice win. Kyrie was obviously out last night, but, even with Kyrie, I talked about it. Even with Kyrie, he hasn't been good. Last night he didn't play, but again, I have the stats right here. He shot 36.4% in the 2 games that he's played without Kevin Durant. 22.2% from 3. Both of those were losses. Not good enough. Again, we're not asking this Net team, and again, we expect this Nets team to struggle a little bit without Kevin Durant. We do. When your best player is not playing, you're gonna feel the impact. But you got to overcome it. You got to find ways to win some games. You can't, you can't just keep losing games and expect, us as fans to just give the Nets a pass. You can't just lose 6 in a row and be like, KD's out. It's okay. We're witnessing the same thing we saw last season. KD goes down, season collapse. It's frustrating, but they got to turn this thing around. The Nets are getting smacked around right now, and it's no longer 12 straight. This is great. You're missing your best player. Other guys got to step up, and right now they're not. Nobody's stepping up right now. We need a guy to step up and have a big game coming up. Somebody. Ben Simmons, you got it. 10 points last night. I get it. Go out there and score. Go out there. Get to the rim. Drive a little bit. Be aggressive. I want to see a nice 16, 18-point game from Ben. Can we see that? Maybe. KD's out. Maybe I got to find a way to score a little bit more. Should that be the thought process a little bit? Just not playing with much energy. Like, Kevin Durant's out. Guy, you got to step up. And it seems to be, it's almost like, I don't know. It's a weird energy they're playing with right now. It's like, obviously, they know Kevin Durant's out. I don't want to act like they don't, but it's almost like they're playing as if they're trying to do their normal thing. You got to be a little bit more aggressive. A shot that you maybe not, take a couple more shots. Take it to the hoop. Try to draw a foul. Be a little bit more aggressive on the defensive end, right? Use your length more. That's for everybody. Right now, this Net team's they're not enough scoring without Kevin Durant. Need guys to step up, and right now they're not. So they'll be back tomorrow. So anyway, that will do it for the podcast here today. Stick around. I will have a Bubbs Talking Baseball podcast up later today. I also might have a podcast up on In the Trench with Gang Green. So if you're interested, check out those. Those will be up here in a little bit. Talking a little Tommy Pham to the Mets as they get their 4th outfielder. Also be talking a little Yankees outfield rumors as well. Are the Yankees done making moves? All that will be addressed in the upcoming Bubbs Talking Baseball podcast. So stay tuned for that. And that will do it. As always, hope you enjoyed it. And thanks for watching.